Today, we're diving into a really unusual parable. It's all about memory, faith, and this mysterious stone that seems to, well, come alive. It's a story that really sits at the crossroads of science and belief.
And it all kicks off with this one big question. Can a stone, something we think of as totally cold and lifeless, actually hold a memory? Let's unpack the story that asks us to think about just that.
So, to get to the bottom of this, we have to start with the object at the very heart of the story. A relic that is so much more than just a piece of rock.
Okay, so picture this. For centuries, a village has been guarding this precious relic. It's described as a dark, solid mass, and it's sealed away inside a glass case. Now, to any outsider, it would just look like an inert lump, but for this community, it was like a frozen moment in time. A real, tangible piece of their history.
So, where did this thing even come from? Well, the story goes that it was believed to be from their patron saint, a man named Januarius. And get this, it wasn't just a stone he touched. It was a petrified fragment of his very being. That's a pretty intense way of saying this object is directly connected to an ultimate act of sacrifice, embedding that memory right into its very substance.
But, a cold stone is just a stone. What the villagers did with it, that's what makes this story so powerful. They had a ritual, a tradition built around this idea of connection and, well, warmth.
And this ritual, it involved everyone. You had the children, right, with their pure, unquestioning belief. Then you had the elders, whose faith had been through the ringer, but who still held on to those old stories. And together, they all formed this community, totally united in one single purpose.
The ritual itself was actually beautiful in its simplicity. So on special feast days, they'd all gather around the case. Their prayers are described as being like the warm breath of a spring day on the cold earth. What a powerful image, right? And their request was simple, for the stone to change, to prove that the memory it held wasn't dead, but a living spring.
And then something incredible would happen. The dark, solid mass would actually stir. It would begin to soften and liquefy, transforming into what was described as a vibrant, living spring of crimson, swirling around inside its glass prison. A totally impossible transformation right before their eyes.
Now, whenever something like this happens, you just know it's going to attract different interpretations. And this brings us right to the core tension in this whole parable, the collision of a scientific explanation and a profound, deeply held faith.
On one hand, you had the scholars and the cynics. They suggested a perfectly natural explanation for all this. A thixotropic gel. That's a real substance that becomes liquid when it's shaken or stirred, so is probably just responding to the vibrations and the body heat from the crowd. But for the villagers, no way. This was no chemical trick. To them, it was a profound truth made real, a living spring of grace responding to their faithful hearts.
And that's really the crucial point here. For the people who believed, it wasn't about how it happened, but what it meant. They saw it as undeniable proof that the great sacrifices made so long ago weren't just old stories. They believed those actions still held a living power, a power that could literally reach across the centuries and touch them right in the present.
But hold on, because the story takes an even deeper turn here. It's not just about when the miracle worked. It turns out it's actually more about when it didn't. And this is where we find the real lesson of the whole parable.
So, if the liquefaction was a sign of a living memory, what on earth did it mean when it failed? When the stone just stayed solid. Was the saint angry? Was it some kind of prophecy of doom? Well, the villagers' interpretation was something else entirely. They didn't see the failure as some bad omen coming from the outside world. Instead, they saw it as a reflection of their own inner state. If the stone remained cold and hard, it was because a chill had settled into their own hearts. Their faith had grown weak, maybe solidified by fear or fighting amongst themselves.
And this is where we get this incredible concept of the spiritual mirror. The stone wasn't predicting the future like some kind of crystal ball. Nope, it was reflecting the present state of the community's collective soul. It was like a barometer for their own warmth, their own faith, their own fears. The miracle wasn't just in the stone liquefying, it was in the self-reflection it forced them to have.
So let's zoom out. What is the universal message we're supposed to take from this incredible parable? It's a legacy that flows way beyond just one village and one stone. The beautiful takeaway is this: a life given in love, a great sacrifice, doesn't just end there.
Its power can literally overflow and nourish the future, generation after generation. But there's a catch. The future generations have to do their part. They have to remember to warm their own hearts, to connect with that memory, to pray. And that really leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? Whether you see the stone as a genuine miracle or just a thixotropic gel, the parable's lesson still stands. It asks us to look at our own world and consider what important memories, what great sacrifices from our own past have grown cold and hard, and what would it take for a collective warmth to make them liquid and living once again.